"Well, sir," he said, "everything goes on capitally, my dear Monsieur Bernouin. But here is a man whom I must beg you to put in a safe place, where, then, sir, where you like, provided that the place which you shall choose has iron shutters secured by padlocks, and a door that can be locked." "We have that, sir," replied Bernouin, and the poor coachman was conducted to a closet, the windows of which were barred and which looked very much like a prison. "And now, my good friend," said D'Artagnan to him, "I must invite you to deprive yourself, for my sake, of your hat and cloak." The coachman, as we can well understand, made no resistance. In fact, he was so astonished at what had happened to him that he stammered and reeled like a drunken man. D'Artagnan deposited his clothes under the arm of one of the valets. "And now, Monsieur du Verger," he said, "shut yourself up with this man until Monsieur Bernouin returns to open the door. The duty will be tolerably long and not very amusing, I know, but," added he, seriously, "you understand, it is on the king's service." "At your command, lieutenant," replied the musketeer, who saw the business was a serious one. "By the by," continued D'Artagnan, "should this man attempt to fly or to call out, pass your sword through his body." The musketeer signified by a nod that these commands should be obeyed to the letter, and D'Artagnan went out, followed by Bernouin. Midnight struck. "Lead me into the queen's oratory," said D'Artagnan. "Announce to her I am here, and put this parcel, with a well-loaded musket, under the seat of the carriage which is waiting at the foot of the private stair." Bernouin conducted D'Artagnan to the oratory, where he sat down pensively. Everything had gone on as usual at the Palais Royal. As we said before, by 10 o'clock almost all the guests had dispersed. Those who were to fly with the court had the word of command, and they were each severally desired to be from 12 o'clock. At 10 o'clock Anne of Austria had entered the king's room. Monsieur had just retired, and the youthful Louis, remaining the last, was amusing himself by placing some lead soldiers in a line of battle, a game which delighted him much. Two royal pages were playing with him. "Laporte," said the queen, "it is time for his majesty to go to bed." The king asked to remain up, having, he said, no wish to sleep, but the queen was firm. "Are you not going tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, Louis? To bathe at Conflans I think you wished to do so of your own accord." "You are right, madame," said the king, "and I am ready to retire to my room when you have kissed me. Laporte, give the light to Monsieur the Chevalier de Coislin." The queen touched with her lips the white, smooth brow the royal child presented to her with a gravity which already partook of etiquette. "Go to sleep soon, Louis," said the queen, "for you must be awakened very early. I will do my best to obey you." "Madame," said the youthful king, "but I have no inclination to sleep." "Laporte," said Anne of Austria, in an undertone, "find some very dull book to read to his majesty, but do not undress yourself." The king went out, accompanied by the Chevalier de Coislin, bearing the candlestick, and then the queen returned to her own apartment. Her ladies, that is to say, Madame de Bregy, Mademoiselle de Beaumont, Madame de Motteville, and Sacratin, her sister, so called on account of her sense, had just brought into her dressing-room the remains of the dinner, on which, according to her usual custom, she supped. The queen then gave her orders, spoke of a banquet which the Marquis de Villequier was to give to her on the day after the morrow, indicated the persons she would admit to the honour of partaking of it, announced another visit on the following day to Val de Grace, where she intended to pay her devotions, and gave her commands to her senior valet to accompany her. When the ladies had finished their supper, the queen feigned extreme fatigue and passed into her bedroom. Madame de Motteville, who was on especial duty that evening, followed to aid and undress her. The queen then began to read, and after conversing with her affectionately for a few minutes, dismissed her. It was at this moment D'Artagnan entered the courtyard of the palace, in the co-tutor's carriage, and a few seconds later the carriages of the ladies in waiting drove out, and the gates were shut after them. A few minutes after 12 o'clock Bernouin knocked at the queen's bedroom door, having come by the cardinal's secret corridor. Anne of Austria opened the door to him herself. She was dressed, that is to say, in dishabille, wrapped in a long, warm dressing gown. "Is you, Bernouin?" she said. "Is Monsieur d'Artagnan there?" "Yes, madame. In your oratory he is waiting till your majesty is ready." "I am. Go and tell Laporte to wake and dress the king, and then pass on to the Marshal de Villeroy, and summon him to me." Bernouin bowed and retired. The queen entered her oratory, which was lighted by a single lamp of Venetian crystal. She saw D'Artagnan, who stood expecting her. "Is it you?" she said. "Yes." "Madame, are you ready?" "I am." "And his eminence, the cardinal, has got off without any accident. He is awaiting your majesty at Cours-la-Reine. But in what carriage do we start?" "I have provided for everything. A carriage below is waiting for your majesty. Let us go to the king." D'Artagnan bowed and followed the queen. The young Louis was already dressed. With the exception of his shoes and dalbelt, he had allowed himself to be dressed. In great astonishment, overwhelming Laporte with questions, who replied only in these words: "Sire, it is by the queen's commands